Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Great new topic for you today. Let's do it. Hey, ask Reddit, gather around the cyber fire. What's your creepiest, most unnerving, haunting, frightening story that happened to you? Serious. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When I was 7, my mother took me to a friend's house with her for the afternoon. I was playing on the balcony, which was facing the road, when I saw a woman running up the driveway covered in blood and screaming for help. She was yelling, "He's got an axe. He's killed my husband and he's going to kill me. Please help." I remember freezing in fear as my mom desperately scooped me up to take me into the back room. She hid me under a bed and told me not to come out. I remember being terrified that she would be hurt and trying to scream for her, but I couldn't get any noise out. I snuck out of the room at one point to see what was happening and saw my mom and her friend comforting the poor blood-soaked woman and trying to bandage her very severe wounds. Then the police came and everything else is a blank. From what my mom tells me, the poor couple across the road were attacked by their son. He had a mental illness and for whatever reason attempted to kill them with an axe that day. Both parents survived, but I believe the father had a partial leg amputation. Mom told me years later that while I was hiding under the bed, the son was trying to get into the house, and we were in while holding the axe. He ran off when he heard the police sirens. I had nightmares for a very, very long time, but I'm proud of how selfless my mom and her friend were when faced with the absolutely effing terrifying situation. I was walking through a Target with my sister, and I swear I saw a man having a seizure or something on the floor, but I tried to ignore because my little sister was there. I dropped my sister off with my mom less than 5 feet away from the guy. I went back to look and nobody was there, and I didn't hear a thing, so I will never know if it actually happened or not. I was in the US Air Force based in the Azores. Guy in the squadron told me there was a ghost on Mount Brazil. Went there. Saw this guy walking up the slope towards me. I thought it was one of the guys. When he walked in front of the full moon, I was able to see the moon through him. No, I had not been drinking, and I don't do drugs. I didn't know I could run that fast. Had to buy some new undershorts. My grandfather passed away back in September. He hadn't been well for years, and we knew it was only a matter of time before he passed. Stayed with my grandmother. Slept in the bed my grandfather slept in. He passed away at a hospital. The week I was there, nothing was out of place or strange, just a feeling of emptiness there. Now, I had prior plans to visit both my grandmother and grandfather, arranged before his passing. The feelings in the house this time were a bit different. It seemed more busy and more sad. Every night, when going to bed, there was always this weird feeling. It was as if there was something else in the room, but didn't want to disturb me in any way. A lot of the time, I call my SO when I'm headed to bed and often fall asleep while on the phone with him. Talking to him helps me sleep. Well, this one night, I wasn't able to call my SO, so I decided to just try to fall asleep without calling him. This is when I experienced something I've never experienced before. It was so vivid and so lucid, I still don't know if it was a dream or if it was actually happening. I'm unaware as to what time it is. Sometime later into the night, I'm guessing. As I was laying in bed, it felt as if someone had sat at the side of the bed. Shortly after this mysterious pressure was placed on the bed, it felt as if the force rolled onto the bed directly on top of me. If you have ever had someone lay on top of you, it was the exact feeling. I could make out the exact size and shape of the force. It was about 5'8" and a bit on the heavy side. I'd say around 280 pounds. Very similar measurements to that of my grandfather. I remember trying to talk to the force, getting no response. Shortly after attempting to talk to the force, it feels as though it just floats off of me. I'm still aware as to if I'm awake or asleep. I walk through the house to my grandmother's room and get her to come check out this mysterious force that I just left. She doesn't remember this happening, so I assumed I was dreaming. My grandmother heads back to her room, and I once again attempt to fall asleep. Same thing happens again. Force sits on the bed before rolling on top of me. This time, however, an extreme surge of sadness washes over me. causing me to hysterically cry for what feels like minutes. After I stop crying, the force once again feels as if it floats away. Finally, the last encounter with this mysterious force is what scared me the most. I returned to sleep, and once woken up with the force rolling on top of me, once again, I try talking to this force. "It's okay, Grandpa. I know it's you. It's okay." Immediately after I tell the force that, it jolts up and off the foot of the bed, followed by an entity I can only describe as a demon. I did not get a sense of malicious intent, rushing at me from the corner of the room. It got right in my face. I could see the grotesque feature of its face, the wrinkles, the slender chin, its sharp teeth, and its grin. It whispered into my ear something I couldn't make out. This caused me to jolt awake in a panic. I wasn't able to fall back asleep after that. I continued to sleep in that same bed, but never got that feeling of something being in the room after this incident. It was as if it vanished. TL, DR. Grandfather passed away, slept in his bed while visiting grandmother. A mysterious entity visited me one night, followed by a demonic figure. Okay, so my rational brain says it was just a psychosomatic reaction to losing your grandfather and staying in his bed. Sure. Now, my more curious side would say, yeah, that was the spirit of your grandfather. That's it. Cool. My experience is unexplainable, but frankly kind of cliche. Like it came right out of a shitty horror movie, and yet telling it still makes me teary-eyed from how terrifying it was. Context: this was in 2012. I remember everything perfectly. I was staying at a summer camp in Scotland. That Sunday, the kids whose stay were over would go back home and new ones would come in the following day. But I still had a week left to stay, as did only 2 other kids in the entire camp. Let's call them Abdul and Carla. So it's Sunday, and the only people left in this gigantic camp are us 3 kids and the staff. This happened during the Olympic Games, which meant that all of the said staff spent their evenings in the common room watching the games and screaming. They were super invested. The camp included several buildings and gigantic open fields. I'm a skeptic with a fascination for the paranormal. I want to believe, but I remain rational. The facts: it happened at night. Abdul, Carla, and I were outside in the middle of one of the fields, doing whatever kids do to have fun. Here's what happened in this order. The super thick Scottish fog started to come down onto the field and surrounding forest and looked very eerie. Abdul pretended to push it back with his magic powers and chanted what he told us was a demonic phrase. Before you ask, I don't remember it. I so wish I did, because it scared me so much after all of this that I blocked it out of my thoughts and eventually forgot it. At this point, we were all laughing it off. The fog dissipates from around us, but we see it get really thick over the trees in the distance, and we're getting worried that there might be a fire somewhere. Nothing supernatural so far. As we wonder about the possible fire, both Abdul and Carla suddenly say that they feel the ground starting to shake under their feet. To be honest, I concentrated real hard and didn't feel anything, so I really can't say if that was their minds playing tricks or not. Regardless, it made us even more nervous. The weird stuff. We are still in the middle of the field, standing like this, so the 3 of us combined can see everything around us in the open field. It's not a dark night. We can see fairly decently, and there's definitely nobody or nothing around. We are all talking about what's happening when suddenly we hear, and I am 100% serious, creepy violin music starting to play. I felt like it was coming from somewhere in front of me, behind Abdul, but there was nothing there. The music sounded close to us, moderately loud but close, like within a few meters close, and there was nothing there at all. Abdul says in a terrified voice, "What the is that?" The music stops abruptly, right as he says that. I almost shat my pants. I'm getting jittery again just typing this. We stand in stunned silence, staring at each other with terrified looks. After a moment of petrified silence, all 3 of us hear, "Ha ha ha." A very deep man's voice, laughing like a demon or villain probably would in a movie. This time it sounded stereo, very close to us, almost above, and my ears couldn't pick up the side from which it was coming, like you normally could if there was a speaker or speakers playing. We took off, screaming at the top of our lungs. I have never run so fast in my entire life. We barricaded ourselves in a room and freaked out for the remainder of the night, as kids do. Of course, when we gathered enough courage to open the door, we went to ask the staff about this joke that they could be playing on us, and they were genuinely confused. All of them were watching the Olympic Games the whole time. I think most of them probably didn't even believe our weird lame kid story, and they brushed it off despite our panic. Had it been a prank, I really have no clue how they could have gotten the sounds to play so close to us. There were definitely no speakers anywhere in this huge, tightly cropped field, which was used daily. Even then, you can definitely hear when a sound is playing from a speaker, but our brains couldn't locate the sound, which is what confuses me the most about this. I don't know how this is physically possible. Very lame and cliche overall, and I don't believe in the devil or demons, but I was still terrified. If it was a prank, it was a good one. And if it was real, you guys, the way you were writing it, it almost sounded like I was picturing three adventurers in like a kind of D&D setting, so pretty cool. A little over a year ago, my great-grandfather died of a heart attack at age 82. His funeral was held shortly after. Ever since his funeral, I've experienced paranormal activity. Lights would flicker without explanation. I would hear footsteps upstairs when no one else was home. At around 1 a.m., I felt cold for some reason, even though it was a humid July night. A few minutes later, I feel something tickling my feet. I look and nothing is there. Then my TV turns on by itself, but the creepiest experience I've had was seeing a shadow of a man that was 5'6" and around 140 pounds. He wasn't a very large man. He was around that height and weight. TL, DR, great-grandfather dies. Experiences paranormal activity ever since. I have 3 scary experiences. One, when I was in 3rd grade or something, I was going home from the school library. While walking, I heard, believe me or not, seriously, I heard the Five Nights at Freddy's, or at least sounded like it, Balloon Boy. I heard it a lot more pitched. It said, hello. Afterwards, I heard a car screech. 2. This may have been a hallucination, but I saw something really fast going black creature go through the end of our road. 3. I was once home alone. Suddenly the dogs start barking. I thought they barked for fun like they often do, but I saw a balloon in front of my window. It was just there. Even though the wind was strong, then it got to our sauna and popped. What the F? A few years ago, I had this one work friend. Her household was all witches, with her as the head of the family. I don't think they were Wiccan, because I looked up Wiccanism and it doesn't really fit what they did. I myself have no problem with it. She was a genuinely and generally very kind woman who would always talk about her kids like they were the best thing ever. Typical mom behavior. Once I had some business with family closer to where she lived, and instead of having me drive all the way back home groggy, my coworker let me spend the night. Her kids were at their grandparents', so after a quick text asking her kid for permission, she said I could sleep in her teenage daughter's room instead of the couch. The room itself was fine, nothing out of the ordinary. If anything, it looked like a bedroom from Kiki's delivery service or something. Her daughter's room was full of plants, dried flowers, and several paintings done by herself. When I'd settled in to go to bed, I looked around the room, mainly at all of her paintings. They were very well done, and I was honestly thinking about asking to buy some of her art for my apartment. One piece of art was a bit out of the ordinary. One of the shelves on her bookshelf had several crystals and candles on it, and what I think were her tarot cards, which didn't bother me much at all. There was a drawing propped up against a tall crystal. The drawing was a bust of a woman with a serene smile. She had wavy hair parted down the middle and some flowers in her hair with very rounded features. At this point, I kind of knew this was an altar, but I was more curious than anything. Now, this was a few years back. I realize now that this was dumb as hell, but back then I didn't. I saw a lavender-scented candle on this altar, and I took my lighter out of my back pocket and lit it. The room was full of candles, so just one burning to smell nice wouldn't hurt, is what I told myself. By this point, I kind of felt the sensation of being watched, but brushed it off as being creeped out by the idea of witches because of media. I started to look at the altar more, with growing curiosity. There was a dried daffodil next to the drawing, and a little thing of mint oil. What caught my eye was a little clay pomegranate. I picked it up to examine it, and as soon as I removed it from the shelf, I shivered and my stomach lurched. The feeling in the room changed from relaxing and nice to one that felt angry and annoyed, like when your mom came home angry as a kid, but 10 times worse. I quickly put back the pomegranate and crawled under the quilts, and the room changed back to calm. With the scent of lavender in the air, I quickly fell asleep. I don't know if this part was a dream or not, but I remember this clear. I woke up to the sound of a woman softly humming. When I sat up, I froze in fear. A woman with a flower crown was sitting on the floor by the shelf with her elbows propped up on the wood. She was calmly watching the candle with a relaxed smile. From what I remember, she was barefoot in a white dress. I can't explain it, but I felt like I shouldn't have been looking at her. Without a word, she turned her head to look at me, and her expression turned sour. And the room had that annoyed aura again. Only later would I realize that this was the woman in the drawing. At the time, I was preoccupied with shaking violently. Here was this weird lady, illuminated by light, staring me down in disgust. I don't know how long we stared at each other, but after a while she just shook her head and scrunched her nose as if to say, "Shame," and then almost evaporated. My next memory was waking up that morning. I didn't say anything about the woman to my coworker, just thanked her again and left. I have no idea what that was, but I know that it clearly wasn't happy with me for touching the altar. I guess what scares me the most is the near-perfect drawing of her on the shelf. If anyone has any idea what the hell that was, I'll gladly listen. TL, DR, spent the night at a witch's house, pissed something off by messing around.